Good evening and welcome to the last session of the 10th Annual Regulators and Policymakers Retreat being organized by IPPAI and Aviation Watch. And with me is Mr. Syed Tanveer Hussain. Welcome to the show, Mr. Hussain.
Thank you.
So, we'd like to know, given your experience and long innings with the government of Bangladesh, you started your career off and ended it with a brilliant distinction as a committed civil servant. You have a background in economics. And therefore, given your background in the various ministries that you worked your way through, so we'd like to know, what is Bangladesh's outlook on energy and infrastructure?
Thank you very much. I have been involved in the energy and the environment and the minerals infrastructure ministries for about 9 years. And this conference is slightly unusual in the sense that other conferences that I have been to, people usually come in, speak, and go away, and everybody collects the papers after the seminars. The refreshing and the breath of fresh air in this conference has been that everybody was allowed to speak openly, frankly, and freely all the 3 days throughout the conference with no formal agendas. The result was there was a tremendous exchange of ideas and a lot of stimulating thought emerged. Insofar as Bangladesh is concerned, we have learned, I have learned at least one or two things which would bring all the, if you consider the SAARC countries as the basis for regulatory reform, then you will find that India is way ahead of the others in many respects. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan are at different levels. So if you try to develop a consensus sort of grade even within this region, you will have difficulties because of the regulatory and infrastructure, lack of regulation and infrastructure. Infrastructure basically has to be of three kinds. One is the financial infrastructure, the money that's required. One is the regulatory infrastructure, and the other is the physical infrastructure, the actual grid lines, etc. And of all these three things, when you compare the countries, they're all at different levels. So we have to have a plan where all the ducks are lined up in a row before we can proceed, and everybody is on an even playing field. Insofar as the Indian situation is concerned, the learning that I have got from this conference with regard to the Electricity Act which they had introduced and which we in Bangladesh probably ought to emulate to some extent, especially with regard to the word open access. Open access is a term which has not yet become relevant or widespread in Bangladesh. And open access means everybody has open access to the grid power lines. And then you can have a tremendous boost in the generation of power. Simply generating power stations will not do the trick. You need to have revised transmission lines, you need to have what you call renovated substations, and proper distribution systems. All this the private sector can do on a public-private partnership basis, and this is what I learned from this conference. The last thing that I learned was that capacity building and awareness creation itself is lacking not only in India but all the other countries of the world. And no matter how hard you try to develop these things and from the top down, unless you have the farmer and the person down on the street level aware of what is happening, unless you build his capacity, nothing will happen.
So you were the secretary to the government of Bangladesh. What has Bangladesh's experience been in the fuel supply scenario? For example, most nations in Asia are facing this, either they are deficit of fuel in some way or the other, or they have a surplus which they are not able to sell across very easily.
We have a very unique position. Bangladesh has been growing at a steady rate of 5 to 7% for the last 20 years. And that is a record which very few people can we emulate, and it baffles us also. We keep thinking that we are on the threshold of an investment breakthrough. And if you go into Dhaka now, even at the time of the biggest turmoils that have occurred in the last 1 or 2 or 3 years, you will never find any 5-star hotel empty. They're all full with all kinds of people, starting from Americans to Germans to Japanese to Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis. Everybody is out there trying to build business. So regardless of what is happening in the rest of the world, somehow Bangladesh is going ahead. And what we need to do is create, just like India has created a big fat consuming middle class that will then generate enough capacity for industries to come in and feed them. If Bangladesh can create that kind of a middle class, then we have all the ingredients for solid growth lined up in the next 2 to 3 years.